Hi, everybody. Okay. As Michael said, my name's Tony. I went to the Amazon reInvent conference, and yes, there is a colon in the name. This is my third year going, and every year it just gets bigger and crazier. This is Amazon's chance to just spew for 5 days about all the crazy stuff they invent every year. They have a graph, I wish I had a copy of it here, of how many services they release every year, and it's basically going like this. So my first year, I think they made 20 announcements. This year it was more like 60. In between conferences, they release 1,000 other things. So anyway, this year, it was so big, they actually had to bust out of the normal conference center that they use, which was between the Venetian and the Palazzo. So it was actually in 5 different hotels this time. There were about 32,000 people. There were about 700 sessions. They actually added a day, so it was a full 5 days this year. I really don't know what they're going to do next year. Getting up and down the escalators, if you've ever been, you know that it's a little tense. So there were at least 30 what I'm going to call big announcements. It's really hard to classify sometimes what's a group of announcements and what are separate announcements, but we'll call it 30 big announcements just at the con. Some were obviously aimed at big competitors. They take a swipe at Oracle basically every year. They actually put Larry Ellison jumping around on a slide this year and made fun of his America's Cup boat. I believe the phrase was, "This ship has sailed." Then the other ones that I don't quite understand is they build this cool platform, they invite customers in to build cool stuff, and then they go build the same thing and kind of eat their own lunch. So we'll get to some of those too. So the first thing they always announce is new instance types. They always wait till, well, sometimes they do it in between, but normally at reInvent is when they talk about new instance types. And of course, they all have more memory and more stuff. This year, they really went over the top. 5 new families. So T2 is an existing family, but now you can get even bigger ones, more memory, more everything. The R3 family turns into the R4 family, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest one now, as you can see, is almost a half a terabyte of RAM and 20 gigabytes of network throughput, if that's not enough. Which you'll see later when I get to the Snow things, that won't be enough. But the big exciting 2 new ones, one is called the F1. Anybody heard of FPGAs before? Any hardware people? Okay, so they are now going to rent you instances with 1 or more FPGAs built in. An FPGA is what's called a field programmable gate array, and if you haven't done hardware stuff, you probably have had no reason to heard of these things. But basically, it's a chip that you tell it how to arrange its gates. So it's not a burned chip yet. It's not a processor. It's not anything yet. So you use a thing called a hardware description language, and you say, I need an AND gate connected to an OR gate, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, you have something that can do Bitcoin 25,000 times faster than actually a general purpose CPU would be able to do. They put in the latest high-end FPGAs from a company called Xilinx. And they, as you can see, come in multiple sizes. And, oh, sorry, next slide. This one, I hate to use the phrase, but this one could be a game changer. For folks that are really trying to eke out performance and just can't get it out of an x86 CPU, if you build your algorithm into hardware, this is how you get lightning fast performance for a very particular, piece of code. The other piece to this is they're going to let people design FPGA stuff and then sell it internally on the marketplace that's part of AWS, the App Store, except now you'll be downloading chip designs. And so if somebody comes up with the best quicksort ever, you can rent it from them. The other really interesting thing is they added instance types, I don't know, about a year ago, that have GPUs in them. So if you're doing big data, you're doing graphics rendering, you're doing other big crazy things, you need thousands of cores, you can get instances with GPUs, but they weren't flexible enough for some customers. You could only get certain sizes with certain memory and all this other stuff. So instead, now you can go get almost any other instance type and attach a GPU to it when you launch the instance. They're elastic, just like their IP addresses and everything else. So attachable GPUs. Those are coming. Interestingly enough, It's Windows only at first, which is really odd for Amazon. So you'll be able to do Windows and OpenGPL. You can do that today. They have development instances you can go launch right now. Linux is next, and then they're going to work on other interfaces and so on. Anybody use really low-end, cheap virtual hosting, maybe for your kid's Minecraft server? DigitalOcean? So they're taking on the little guy now. They introduced a new service called Lightsail, and it is finally flat rate VPSs, tiny little ones, half a gig of RAM, whatever you want. But you'll notice at the top is the Amazon price list, and then the bottom is the DigitalOcean price list. They match dollar for dollar, byte for byte. There's only two differences, and that's DigitalOcean gives you more cores on a couple of different slices. The idea, I think, is they want to get the people in who only want to pay $5 a month, and then once you get you hooked, you can then start leveraging S3, and you can leverage all the other Amazon services, and then they've got you forever. So there you go. All right, like I said, there were so many announcements this year. I'm going to group them and kind of fly through some of them. The first set are all kind of data-oriented. Athena is very interesting. It's the ability to do SQL queries on flat files in an S3 bucket. Everybody knows what S3 is, right? Or do I? Oh. All right, S3 is their big block storage thing. You get giant buckets, you can put petabytes of data in them, and it costs you pennies to let you store big data. It's not a file system, it's more like you push a file to a web server and then you can get it back whenever you want. So you can put lots of data in big S3 buckets. Well, now you can put CSV files in there, or YAML files, or JSON files, or whatever, and you fire up Athena, and it loads these files. You tell it how to turn that into columns, and suddenly you're doing SQL joins across giant text files without actually having to first load them into a database. Pretty cool. And because they're going to run it across thousands of cores for you, and you only pay for the time your queries execute, it's actually super cheap for you, but it'll come back in like seconds. If you tried to do this yourself with just other AWS instances, it would cost you a lot more. Aurora is their own structured database. They have DynamoDB, which is their NoSQL database. They also have Aurora, which is a pure SQL database, and when originally announced, it was MySQL compatible. So if you had something that already used MySQL, you could point it at their database instead, and it was suddenly 6 times faster and cheap. And this was their big swipe last year at Oracle. They're basically saying, we're faster and cheaper than Oracle. Why would you ever want to use them? Come use Aurora. And I guess enough people said, well, that's great, but we're used to Oracle, which actually follows the SQL standard. So we'd prefer Postgres compatibility, because MySQL is not even close to being standardized. And so they've added Postgres compatibility. I'm personally really excited about this one, but I really like Postgres. Pinpoint, I don't know a whole lot about, but it's a user engagement measurement tool for mobile applications. And if you're following along on your BuzzCard bingo cards, you should have a column by now. It's just a way, if you're using, they have all this mobile and IoT stuff now, and if you're using their things, this is a magic analytics thing to let you know how often your users use your app, how long they stay, et cetera, et cetera. This is the one I think most people got just kind of excited about because it was big and flashy. They have I put these in the human interaction category. Poly is a text-to-speech API, and basically you can throw it a string of text, and you can pick one of 97 voices, and it will send you back an MP3 or an OGG file or a PCM file, which I think is specifically for people who are going to use it for telecom applications. And this is available today. By the way, sorry, I should be telling you which one of these are actually available and not. Poly is available today. I used it this morning. In fact, let's try this. Never mind. I was hoping it was come out the big speakers. Anyway, it's a fully API'd voice. So if you have like a phone system, then you want to automate all the responses, but you need them to be totally variable, not all pre-recorded, you can now fire it at Poly. It also speaks many, many different languages. If you want it to speak Russian or I think Chinese was in there, but they have different voices that have the different sets of phonemes so that you can get it to actually sound like kind of like a native speaker, kind of. So it's pretty impressive. Recognition. Oh, interesting. It's actually spelled with a K, and my spell checker fixed it for me. Recognition is an image, it's just what it sounds like. It's an image recognition system. You can feed it a bunch of images, and it will say there are 4 people in this picture, 3 of them have their eyes open, and the dog at the bottom is a golden retriever. I'm not kidding. You can use it to do all kinds of stuff. The example they used, which combines the third up there, which is Lex, is you pull out your Amazon Echo. Everybody at the show got a dot. You pull that out, and then you say, Alexa, I want to go to London. And it books a trip for you. So Lex is a natural language parsing and speech recognition system that you can now write your own Alexa-style app. So you ever want to write an app that makes it feel like you're talking to the Starship Enterprise? You're all set. You just have to get the right voice. But the idea is that you could go and say, I want to go to a city with cool bridges. And it would use the image recognition system to go search cities that have pictures of bridges in them, and then it would suggest a list of cities to you. So this image recognition system is going to be used for a lot of stuff, and I'm sure it will not be abused at all. Okay. Last year they started this huge push on Internet of Things, and this year was no different. But as we all know, there have been some problems with Internet of Things stuff lately. Maybe you heard back in September, a group of people figured out that there was a certain set of cameras on the internet that were very easily broken into, and they used them to create the largest distributed denial of service attack of all time, which was over 650 gigabits a second. So almost like over a half a terabit of data, all pointed at Brian Krebs' blog, because he had written an article about some nasty crime group on the internet. Anyway, Amazon wants to try and fix this and come up with more secure ways to do the Internet of Things. So, Lambda. Anybody heard of Lambda? And I don't mean the fraternity from Revenge of the Nerds. Sorry, 80s reference. Lambda is what they call their serverless computing, and I'll go into this a little more later, but it's the idea that you write a bunch of code and you give it to Amazon, and then it will run without you actually having to fire up an instance to run it on. It's serverless. So now they want to put Lambda in your refrigerator. And so they came up with this thing called Greengrass. And the big deal with it is that it will run even if it's disconnected from the internet. It lets your little devices all use a slightly larger device they call a core device. And when I say larger device, I mean something the size of a Raspberry Pi. And it will make it, all the other little devices still think they're attached to the internet, and then when it does, the internet does come back, it'll handle all the magic synchronization and things. It's super expensive. It's 16 cents a month per device. That was a joke. Or $1.49 a year if you will pay for a year up ahead of time. So, Amazon in your fridge coming soon. The next group is what I'll call operations things. X-Ray is an app performance tracing and debugging tool. You can kind of think New Relic. This is in that category of things of they're going to try and eat their own customers' lunch. It's pretty impressive. You send in a web request and it will show you how long did it take your query to run, where did it get stuck, how long did your Lambda functions take to fire, all that kind of stuff. Code Build is a CI/CD tool as a service. So instead of spinning up 18,000 instances, running your giant J2EE application through a build tool and having it pop out on the other end and you have to manage all that, you just create a build thing, send it off, and it does everything for you, and you only pay for the number of minutes it takes to run your build. I know my company is excited about that one. Batch is just what it sounds like. It's a thing to run batch jobs. It's probably the most unexciting thing they announced, but DevOps people are probably pretty excited about it because nobody actually likes doing batch jobs, right? You'd rather have Amazon do it for you. The personal health dashboard is an upgraded version of the current dashboard. It's got lots more metrics and stuff on like that, but it wasn't super exciting. Anybody name this movie? Or The Magician on the front left? Thank you. It's Hackers, yes. All right, networking stuff. They finally added IPv6 support for real. It used to be you could get IPv6 on the edge. You could get it through ELBs and stuff. But now you can actually have your instances talk IPv6 to each other. And now maybe something the size of Amazon turning on IPv6 will all be using it tomorrow. No, all right. Shield is their distributed denial of service. It does exactly what you think it does. It protects you from distributed denial of service attacks like I was talking about before. They have 2 levels of service. They have standard, which is free. It's just part of the Amazon service. If you're on their network, you get the standard level of service. If you want to pay $3,000 a month plus transmission charges for all the extra packets, they will give you advanced support, which as far as I can tell, just means they call you and let you know it's happening. I'm not entirely sure. Okay, these are the fun ones. The Snowball. Last year, if you saw my talk, I talked about this crazy box that they will send to you in the mail that contains 50 terabytes of disk. That is an Amazon Paperwhite Kindle stuck to the front of it. That is the mailing label. They did that because when you're done, it automatically flips the shipping label to the return address so you don't accidentally ship it to the wrong place. This has happened to people moving lots of data around, so they wanted to make sure it couldn't happen to you. And they'll ship it basically anywhere. So this year, that wasn't enough. It's now 100 terabytes of disk in a box. And it runs Lambda inside the box because some people wanted to be able to use this thing offline. Here's the scenario they give you. You have a ship and you collect data from the ocean. And so you're not necessarily on the internet, or if you are, your internet connection is very, very slow. So you want to jam your large data sets into a giant box with 100 terabytes of disk in it. But at the same time, you want all your systems to think that they can run Lambda functions that operate on that data and shove small pieces of data in S3 at the same time. That box will do it. But that wasn't enough at all, because they believe they actually have customers with exabytes of data. Anybody know how many zeros that is? I don't. It's a lot. It's actually 1,000 petabytes. But anyway, they have the Snowmobile. Believe it or not, they drove a truck on stage in the middle of a keynote. That 45-foot shipping container has 100 petabytes of disk inside of it. If you have an exabyte of data and a really fat network connection, it would take you about 24 years to transfer your data into S3. If you have this truck show up and you fill it and then you have another one and another one, they say it'll only take 6 months. Basically, when I talked about 20 gigabytes of networking not being enough, this truck can do a terabit of networking if your network will support it. So they drive this sucker up, they plop it in your parking lot, they will pay for security guards to watch it, they will pay for an escort to drive next to it when it's on the freeway. Your 100 petabytes of data will get there. All those cat videos will be safe. It will be okay. I don't have pricing for this one. I really, really wanted to say, and it only costs 12 cents a mile. Basically, you call them up and professional services comes to your company, and it's a project, right? Like with a Microsoft project chart and all this crazy stuff, and they figure out how you're going to get it done. So there's no pricing. However, to demo this before they had the real truck, they built Lego versions of the truck, and for the first 5 customers, you get the Lego truck for free. I know you wanted that. Okay, Lambda. I talked about Lambda a little bit already. This is serverless computing, except it runs on servers. You couldn't stop hearing about Lambda this year. This is where Amazon is. If you want to be on the cutting edge of whatever Amazon's doing for the next year or so, start learning how to leverage Lambda. Every session you went to on any other service, the answer was, and it uses Lambda. I'm serious. You went to the DDoS talk, you went to the IAM talk, you went to the whatever, right? They showed security policies where you say, I can't do this, and it was a Lambda function that would enforce it. So it's all about Lambda. We don't currently allow it at our company, so all the developers were really, really depressed. But we're going to. So the big announcements about Lambda are, and this goes right into the next talk, they added Go support. They currently have Python, JavaScript, and Java, and Go, and they added C#. So those are the languages you can now program Lambda in. They also added something called Lambda at Edge. For some people, it was too slow for a request to come in, hit their CDN, go all the way to the data center, talk to Lambda, and come back. So you can now have Lambda functions run at the edge routers, basically. You can if you're a Rails developer, think of this as rack middleware, except the very first piece of rack middleware runs in 53 locations around the globe simultaneously. And so when a request comes in, you can say, no, I don't take IE6 connections, goodbye, and hang up on them if you want to. All right, no browser jokes. This is currently available today in the Virginia, Ohio, Oregon, Ireland, and Tokyo regions. Yes, there is an Ohio region now, in case anybody had missed that. Way to go, Ohio. There's even more stuff that I'm not even going to get to, so those are the names of them. They had a big VMware announcement. They actually brought the CEO of VMware. Does anybody still use VMware? Okay, 2 guys. That announcement was for you. Basically, you can use your VMware licenses in the cloud. I'm not sure why. All right. So for me, the moral of this story, other than they handed out jackets, these are these snazzy jackets, because the party was outside and it was about 45 degrees that night, is be careful what you build in the cloud, because if it becomes too popular, Amazon might also build it, and they will sell it for a lot less than you do. Something that I thought was severely missing is they added a feature a year or so ago called VPC endpoints. This is a really nerdy feature, and the only service they support is S3, and 2 years later, the only service they support is S3. I really wanted them to add a bunch of other stuff. If you want a lot more detail on everything I just whizzed by in a big hurry, this is the link to the official AWS blog, limited just to the reInvent announcements. If you really care about AWS, this is the blog to follow, because every new feature, every new thing they do, even in between the shows, all gets announced on this blog. And there's this really nice smiling face of Jeff on every post, and you'll get really tired of him. Anyway, it was a super fun show. Like I said, there was this huge party outside they throw every year. They get a big DJ because their CTO loves DJs. And at 32,000 people, I'm really not quite sure what they're going to do next year except 6 hotels or build a bigger hotel or anything like that. So if you want to go next year, sign up early. Spots go quick. And that is it. Thank you very much.